I learned the sound of a grown man losing his sight before I learned what freedom felt like. It is a choking panic that makes a strong voice crack like a boy's. The morning after he put the whip to my back, Mr. Dalton came out of his little overseer's house in his nightshirt, both hands pressed hard against his eyes, as if he could squeeze the darkness back out. He staggered down the steps, barefoot in the packed Georgia red dirt, and yelled, "I can't see, God help me, I can't see anything." At first I thought he was drunk. Then I heard the thin, terrified sound in Mrs. Dalton's throat as she tried to pry his hands away. "Open your eyes," she kept saying, like it was a choice. He screamed back, "They are open." Slaves stopped in the yard with hose and buckets frozen mid-air. Nobody spoke. I stood in the doorway of the quarters, my back tight under my dress, still raw in a way that made breathing feel like a mistake. I watched him stumble into the sunlight and still act like he was in a cellar. I watched him reach for the fence post, miss it, and fall hard on his knees. You don't feel sorry when a man like that falls. Not right away. First you feel a kind of blank. Then you feel your heart beat once, slow, like it is checking if this is real. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I didn't even move. I just listened to his terror and tried to decide if it had anything to do with me. Because 24 hours earlier, he had dragged me to the whipping post for a broken plate. It was Mrs. Thornton's plate. Imported from England, she liked to say, like the ocean had carried it for her alone. I was in the kitchen at the Thornton plantation in rural Georgia, hands wet from washing, trying to stack dishes before supper. The plate slid out of my fingers. It didn't leap. It didn't fight me. It just slipped and hit the floor and cracked into bright pieces. I stared at it like it was my own bone. A sound came out of my mouth that wasn't quite a word. I bent down fast, stupid fast, thinking if I gathered every shard maybe time would rewind. Then Mrs. Thornton's voice cut through the room. "Serafina, if you've never heard your name said like a verdict, you don't know what a name can do to you." I kept my eyes down. I said, "I'm sorry, ma'am. It was an accident." My voice came out small on purpose. Small voices sometimes survive. She didn't come closer. She didn't need to. Her rage filled the whole kitchen. "Worthless," she said. "Clumsy. You think you can destroy my property." She called for Mr. Dalton like she was calling for a tool. He appeared in the doorway, hat in his hand, a man who wore his authority like a grin. 20 lashes, she said. "In the yard, where everyone can see." The number hit me first, not the pain. The number, 20. I had been whipped before, everybody had. But 20 meant she wasn't trying to correct me. She was trying to make me disappear inside my own body. I wanted to explain about the wet hands. I wanted to say the plate could have slipped from anyone. But explanations were for people. I was not people in that kitchen. Mr. Dalton grabbed my arm and pulled me outside. He didn't hurry. He enjoyed the space between the order and the first strike, like a man savoring a meal before it arrives. The whipping post stood in the center of the yard. A thick wooden beam set there like it belonged as much as the big house did. The other slaves were called to watch. That part was always for them, not for me. It was a lesson written on a back. They tied my wrists. They yanked my dress down enough to leave skin open to sun and eyes. I fixed my gaze on the dirt and tried to go somewhere else in my head. The way my mother taught me before she was sold away, when I was 12, she used to whisper, "Leave the body behind. Keep the mind safe." The first strike burned. The second made the world tilt. By the time the counting reached 10, my throat was nothing but sand. I begged for mercy because begging is another kind of breathing. I heard Mrs. Thornton's steps on the porch. I heard her say, calm as pouring tea, "Make sure she feels it." Mr. Dalton felt it for her. He brought the whip down with a rhythm, like he was working. When the 20th hit, I didn't feel it the way I felt the first. I felt distance. Then I felt myself drop when they untied me, and the ground took me like it always did, without opinion. Somebody later dragged me back to the quarters. The women cleaned me with what little we had, herbs and animal fat, and I bit down on cloth so the sound stayed in my mouth and didn't feed the yard. That night I couldn't sleep on my back. I lay face down on a pallet and stared at darkness. I did not pray the way the preacher wanted us to pray on Sundays. I did not ask for patience. I did not ask to be made obedient. I prayed the way my grandmother's voice sounded when she talked about old things she wouldn't say in daylight. I didn't have words for it. I had need. I had heat in my chest that felt too big for my ribs. I prayed for justice. I prayed for Mr. Dalton to feel what it meant to be helpless, not dead. Not even hurt the same way. Just helpless. I poured everything I had into that wish until I was shaking. Then I went under. Sleep. Fainting. Something. I don't pretend I know. And then, in the morning, he was blind. Watching him in the yard, I tried to find my own feeling. You'd think joy would come. You'd think relief. What came was a cold, steady certainty that made my stomach go quiet. It felt like the world had answered me, and the answer was not gentle. Master Thornton came running out of the big house in his dressing gown, hair still uncombed, face angry, because something happened without his permission. He demanded, "What is this?" Dr. Whitmore was sent for from town, and by midday a buggy rolled up with a man who smelled of cologne and confidence. Dr. Whitmore examined Mr. Dalton's eyes with little instruments that looked like they belonged to a jeweler. He asked questions. He shined light. He made Mr. Dalton follow a finger that Mr. Dalton couldn't see. After a while, the doctor's confidence cracked. "There's no injury to the eyes," he said. "No infection. No sign of disease." Master Thornton's voice got sharp. "Then how can he be blind?" Dr. Whitmore cleared his throat. "There are cases of sudden blindness, apoplexy, perhaps. A fever in the brain. Sometimes it happens without warning." He said words like perhaps and sometimes, the way men say prayers when they don't believe. Mr. Dalton sat in a chair on his porch, sweating and shaking, refusing to lower his hands from his face because if he couldn't see, he wanted nobody seeing him. He kept saying, "It's black. It's all black." He sounded like a child in a nightmare. I stood far back with a bucket in my hands, pretending I had a task, watching without being seen. By evening, the plantation was a mouthful of whispers. In the quarters, people talked like the darkness itself might be listening. Some said God punished Dalton for cruelty. Others said it was just chance. A few older ones looked at me, and looked away fast, like you look away from a snake you don't want to anger. I didn't tell anyone about my prayer, not because I was proud, because I was scared. If it was me, if it had anything to do with that night, then something inside me had reached out and broken a man without touching him. That thought didn't make me feel powerful. It made me feel dangerous. Over the next days, my back started to close up, slow and tender. Mr. Dalton did not get better. Dr. Whitmore came again. He tried tonics. He tried leeches. He tried talking about nerves and humors. Nothing changed. Mr. Dalton stayed blind. He couldn't work. He couldn't ride. He couldn't even walk across the yard without someone guiding him. Master Thornton hired a new overseer, a younger man named Mr. Carson. Mr. Dalton and his wife were sent away to live with relatives in Alabama, and people said it like it was a solution. Like you could ship a problem across a state line and call it gone. But the story stayed. It sat under every conversation like a stone. For a while, everyone treated me like glass, not kindness, caution. Mrs. Thornton's eyes stayed on me longer than before. Not with pity, but with calculation. The other slaves kept their distance in a way I had never experienced. I was still one of them, but also not. The same hands that used to pass me a piece of cornbread when the cook wasn't looking now pulled back like I carried sickness. I kept working because working was what I knew. I scrubbed floors. I carried water. I washed dishes with hands that still trembled sometimes, not from fear of pain, but from the memory of that number 20. I told myself the blindness had nothing to do with me. I told myself it was a coincidence. I told myself God had done it. I told myself anything that would let me breathe. But at night, when the quarters went quiet and the air turned heavy with summer, I would stare at the dark and remember how sure my prayer had felt. I would remember the way the world answered, and I would wonder what would happen if someone else put hands on me again. I didn't want to test it. I didn't want proof. Proof would make it real in a way I couldn't take back. Proof would mean the next person who hurt me might lose more than pride. Proof would mean I was carrying something inside me that did not ask permission. A week after Dalton left, I saw his whip still hanging by his door, leather curled like it remembered my skin. I turned away. Fear was protection, and it tasted like rust. That was the first time I understood what the blindness brought me. Not revenge, not the justice I dreamed. It brought me fear, and fear is offense. It can keep hands off you. It can also keep everyone away. I went back to the kitchen and kept my head down. Mrs. Thornton acted like she'd never ordered the lashes. She gave commands, not apologies. Master Thornton acted like he could still control whatever this was by not naming it. Mr. Carson acted careful, eyes always shifting, like he'd heard enough to believe and enough to hope it was all talk. And me, I walked around with my own questions pressing on my ribs. I didn't feel chosen. I didn't feel protected. I felt watched. I felt marked. I felt like one wrong move could turn my life into a thing nobody could fix. I wish I could tell you that morning in the yard changed everything. It didn't, not right away. The plantation kept breathing like it always had. Cotton still got picked. Meals still got cooked. Orders still got barked. Chains still existed even when you couldn't see them. But something had shifted, the way air shifts before a storm. A line had been drawn around me that nobody wanted to cross. I kept thinking about Mr. Dalton's hands over his face. I kept hearing his voice saying, "It's black," and I kept wondering, not like a preacher wonders, but like a trapped girl wonders, what the price of that darkness was going to be. Because in Georgia, every gift comes with a debt, and I could feel the debt starting to collect even before anyone admitted there was a bill. I thought fear would be enough to stop it from happening again, because fear is usually the only thing that works on a plantation. But fear only lasts as long as memory stays sharp. And memory dulls faster than pain, especially for people who have never had to carry pain in their bodies. Mr. Carson was not Mr. Dalton. He was younger, leaner, with a mouth that stayed flat instead of smiling when orders were given. He did his work like a man counting steps, careful where he put his feet, careful not to fall into a hole someone else dug. For a while, that carefulness kept me safe. Weeks passed, my back healed into tight, raised lines that burned when the weather changed. Mrs. Thornton watched me break bread, watched me pour water, watched my hands the way a person watches a thing they don't trust but don't yet know how to get rid of. I worked slower than before, not because I wanted to test what had happened, but because my body had learned something my mind hadn't caught up with yet. That moving carefully sometimes keeps you alive. And then one afternoon, I broke another plate. It was not the same plate. It was not even the same room. I was carrying a tray from the dining room back toward the kitchen. The floor crowded with folded rugs that had been left half done because someone else had been called away. My foot caught the edge. The tray tipped. 3 plates and a crystal glass fell. The sound was louder than before, sharp and unmistakable. I stood frozen, knowing before she spoke that it was already too late. Mrs. Thornton came fast, her face red, breath quick like she had been waiting for an excuse. "You again," she said. "You think I don't see what you're doing?" I shook my head. I opened my mouth. Nothing useful came out. She called for Mr. Carson with a voice that did not allow him to pretend he hadn't heard. When he arrived, She pointed at the broken china, like it was a body. "She's doing it on purpose," she said. "Testing us, destroying my things." Mr. Carson looked at me, really looked. And I saw something flicker there. Doubt, calculation. He had heard the stories everyone had. He cleared his throat and said, "Ma'am, perhaps another punishment would." She cut him off so hard it felt like a slap even from where I stood. I said she needs to be taught a lesson. There was a pause that stretched longer than any pause should. I could hear my own heart, slow and steady, like it had already decided what this was going to be. Mr. Carson swallowed. 10 lashes, Mrs. Thornton said. "And make sure she feels them." 10. Half of 20. A reasonable number in her mind. Enough to remind me who I was. Enough to remind everyone else who they were. Mr. Carson did not want to do it. I could see that, but wanting does not matter when you are paid to obey. They took me back to the post. The yard felt different this time. The slaves who were called to watch did not meet my eyes. Some looked afraid. Some looked angry. Some looked like they were waiting to see if the story was real. When they tied my wrists, I did not beg. I did not pray. I did not explain. Something inside me went quiet, not peaceful, just settled, like a door clicking shut. The first strike hurt. Of course it did. Pain does not care about patterns or rumors. It tore open skin that had barely closed. Mr. Carson counted out loud. His voice shook on the 4th and 5th lash. By the 8th, his jaw was clenched, so tight I thought his teeth might crack. He was not enjoying this. That almost made it worse. When it was done, he untied me himself. He did not look at my back. He did not look at my face. He stepped away like he had touched something that might burn him after all. That night, I lay on my pallet again, staring into dark that felt too familiar. I waited. I did not know what I was waiting for, only that my body seemed to know before I did. Morning came with the sound of screaming. It was the same sound, high, panicked, unmistakable. Mr. Carson was blind. He stood outside his house with his hands shaking in front of his eyes, saying the same words Dalton had said, like they were written somewhere and he was just reading them aloud. "I can't see. It's gone." Dr. Whitmore was sent for again, his confidence thinner this time, his voice softer. He examined Mr. Carson and found the same thing he had found before. Nothing, no injury, no disease, no explanation that fit. By afternoon, nobody was calling it coincidence anymore. They were calling it a pattern. People whispered my name like it might hear them. Master Thornton summoned me to his study. I stood there with my eyes down, my dress sticking to my back where it hadn't finished bleeding. He studied me for a long time without speaking. When he finally did, his voice was careful. "Do you know why this is happening?" he asked. "No, sir," I said, and that was the truth. He leaned back in his chair. "I don't believe in curses," he said, "but I also don't believe in odds like this." He thought for a moment, then made a decision that he would pretend was reason later. "No one is to punish you without my direct permission," he said. "If anyone else goes blind after touching you, I will sell you so far south you'll forget this place ever existed." I said I understood. I did. Safety with a threat attached is still safety. After that, the plantation shifted around me. I became something you walked around instead of through. Overseers changed, but none of them touched me. Orders came through. Distance, mistakes were ignored or fixed quietly. I had become untouchable, and it felt nothing like freedom. It felt like being locked inside glass. People watched me. People feared me. People left me alone. Months passed, then years, and the pattern did not break. A field hand named Jacob struck me one night behind the quarters when he thought no one would see. In the morning, he was blind. A slave trader named Silas Cobb slapped me when Master Thornton tried to warn him. He went blind before he reached Savannah. A minister named Reverend Blackwell hit me with his Bible and called me possessed. He woke up blind and raving. Each time it happened, The space around me grew wider. By the time I turned 21, no one would come near me unless they had to. I did not feel powerful. I felt alone. Fear had built a fence around me, and I was trapped inside it. I started to wonder if this was how my life would end, not with a whip or a chain, but with silence. And then Ruth arrived. And for the first time since the yard went quiet after Dalton fell to his knees, someone sat beside me like I was still a person. Ruth did not arrive like a miracle, because miracles announce themselves and make demands. But she arrived like something ordinary that survives because no one notices it in time to kill it. She was brought in with a small group from South Carolina. People sold off when a plantation folded in on itself the way bad businesses do, quietly and without ceremony. She was about my age, with eyes that paid attention even when she was pretending not to. The first time she spoke to me was in the kitchen, her hands already busy with a towel, drying plates I had washed, as if we had always worked side by side. "They say you're dangerous," she said, not accusing, not afraid, just stating a fact the way you might say, "It was hot outside." I waited for the rest of it, for the step back, for the apology. But it didn't come. "I'm Serafina," I said, because names still mattered to me even when nothing else did. She nodded like that settled something. "I know," she said. We worked in silence for a while. It felt strange having another body so close that wasn't pulling away. Finally I asked her why she wasn't afraid. She shrugged. "If you wanted to hurt people who hadn't hurt you, this place would already be empty," she said. That was the first time anyone had said it out loud. And hearing it made something in my chest loosen just enough to breathe. Ruth did not ask me how it happened. She did not ask me if it was true. She treated me like a person who existed now, not a story that existed later. That alone made her dangerous. Because people who see you clearly give you something to lose. The other slaves noticed. They warned her in low voices. They told her to keep her distance. They said fear sticks. Ruth listened and then kept coming back anyway. Slowly, the space around me changed shape. It did not shrink. It hardened. I was safe from hands, but I was not safe from watching eyes. Master Thornton watched me more closely than before, not with anger, but with calculation. I could see him thinking about value, about risk, about whether a thing that cannot be punished is still property. I heard him arguing late one night with Mrs. Thornton, her voice sharp, his low and tired. I called my name, and then the word problem. That word followed me like a shadow. I wondered if fear would eventually turn into a decision I couldn't survive. I wondered if being untouchable would make me unkeepable. The idea of being sold did not scare me the way it used to. Being sold was movement. Being sold was change. What scared me was being kept like this, fenced off by rumor, fed and housed and worked until I died, without anyone ever touching me again, not in anger and not in kindness. I thought about Mr. Carson sometimes, about the way his voice had shaken. While he counted, I thought about how he had not wanted to hurt me, and how that had not saved him. That was when guilt started to creep in. Not all at once, not like a confession, but like a question that would not sit still. If this thing followed harm, and harm followed orders, and orders followed people like Mrs. Thornton, then why were the men the ones losing their sight? Why not her? Why not Master Thornton? I did not have answers. I only had nights that felt too long and days that felt watched. The plantation settled into this uneasy balance, and I learned how to live inside it. I learned to move slow enough not to draw attention and fast enough not to look idle. I learned to keep my hands steady even when my thoughts weren't. I learned that fear can protect you from pain but not from loneliness, and loneliness, once it starts, does not stop on its own. It needs interruption. Ruth became that interruption. We talked in low voices at night about things that did not fix anything. About her mother, sold away when she was 10. About my grandmother, whose stories had left me with prayers, I did not know how to undo. We talked about freedom like it was, whether, something that existed somewhere else and might roll in if conditions changed. I told her once that I thought what had happened to me might be the only thing keeping me alive. She told me survival was not a small thing. I did not know then how much longer survival was going to ask of me. Because the truth was, part 2 of my life did not end with Mr. Carson. It only proved the pattern was real. And once people believe a pattern exists, they start testing it, whether they admit it or not. Some to see if it will protect them, some to see if it will fail, and some because they believe they are untouchable themselves. The plantation had learned to fear me. The world beyond it had not yet heard my name, and when it did, the cost of being the girl no one could touch was going to rise in ways I could not yet see. The first time I heard my name outside the Thornton plantation, it came back to me like a rumor wearing someone else's mouth. A wagon driver from Savannah stopped for water and said men in town were whispering about her. Kitchen girl in rural Georgia who turned overseer's blind. He tried to laugh as he said it, like the laugh would keep him safe. Master Thornton did not laugh. Mr. Pierce, the new overseer after Carson, went pale and sent the driver away fast. As if words could be contagious, after that, every stranger who stepped onto our land looked at the yard like they expected to see a ghost. Every time a horse slowed near the quarters, I felt the air tighten. Fear had already built a fence around me inside the plantation, but now I could feel the fence trying to grow outward, trying to surround the entire county. And I knew fences like that always invite men who want to test them. Master Thornton tried to control it the way he controlled everything else, by making rules and pretending rules were stronger than what had happened. He ordered that I would work mostly inside, away from the field hands, away from visitors, away from trouble. He told Mrs. Thornton to stop making a spectacle of punishment. He told Mr. Pierce, quietly and with a look that meant he was serious, that if anyone laid hands on me without his permission, that person would be removed from the plantation before sunrise. Mr. Pierce understood the assignment the way a man understands a snake on his porch. He kept distance. He spoke to me like I was glass. When I made mistakes, he pretended not to see them. When Mrs. Thornton started to raise her voice, he intervened with some excuse about schedules or guests. But none of that stopped the smaller cruelties, the ones that come from people trying to earn favor. The plantation had its own kind of hierarchy among the slaves, and there were always a few who thought loyalty could buy them a longer life. Jacob was one of those men. He was large, strong, a field hand with shoulders like a doorframe. Master Thornton used him as an informal enforcer when he didn't want to get his own hands dirty. Jacob liked the role. It made him feel closer to power. It made him feel less like prey. In the summer of 1849 I was sick with fever, the kind that burns your mouth dry and makes your head spin when you stand. I hadn't eaten in 2 days because I couldn't keep anything down. I went into the kitchen late and took an extra piece of cornbread when I thought nobody was looking. I wasn't trying to steal out of spite. I was trying to keep my body from falling apart. Jacob caught me with the bread half hidden under my apron, and his eyes lit up like he'd found a coin. He grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise and dragged me toward Mr. Pierce's office. I didn't fight him. Fighting got you hurt. I just walked and watched his hand around my arm like it didn't belong there. Mr. Pierce took one look at Jacob's grip, and his face drained of color. "Let her go," he said, quiet but sharp. Jacob blinked like he didn't understand the language. "She stole," he insisted. "Rules are rules." Mr. Pierce stepped closer, and for the first time since he arrived I saw anger in him. Real anger, not performative. I said, "Let her go," he repeated, louder, "right now." Jacob released me, but he didn't back down. "She's just a slave," he said. "She broke, and you're about to be a blind slave if you don't learn." Mr. Pierce snapped, and the way he said it made the room go still. Jacob's mouth tightened. He looked at me like I had done something to humiliate him in front of a white man. Mr. Pierce waved me away. I left without running, because running invites pursuit. But my legs shook anyway. That should have ended it. A sensible man would have taken the warning. Jacob was not sensible. That night he cornered me behind the quarters where the shadows were thick and nobody wanted to witness anything. He smelled like sweat and pride. "You think you're special," he hissed. "You think you can steal and make me look stupid." I opened my mouth to speak, but I didn't know what words could do. He struck me across the face. It split my lip, knocked me sideways into the dirt. And for a second the world flashed white behind my eyes. He leaned down close enough that I could feel his breath. "Tell anybody and I'll do worse," he said. Then he walked away like he'd proven something. I didn't tell anybody. I went to my pallet, pressed cloth to my lip, and lay there listening to my own heartbeat. I didn't pray. I didn't ask for justice. I didn't even try to understand. I just waited, because waiting had become part of my life, the way chains become part of your skin. In the morning Jacob screamed. It wasn't a strong man's sound. It was raw terror. He came stumbling into the yard with both hands over his eyes, shouting the same words I had heard from Dalton and Carson. As if blindness had only one script. The other slaves backed away from him, as if he carried fire. Mr. Pierce stepped onto his porch, saw Jacob's face, and closed his eyes for a moment like a man who hates being right. Dr. Whitmore was called again. By then the doctor had lost the smugness he'd brought the first time. His hands moved faster, his voice softer, his eyes less sure. He examined Jacob the way he examined the overseers, found nothing wrong with the eyes, and started talking about nerves and the brain and things he could not prove. Master Thornton's jaw clenched so hard I could see muscle jump under his skin. Jacob was sold away within days. Blind slaves were worth almost nothing. But Master Thornton found someone who needed labor that didn't require sight. Someone who saw a bargain instead of a tragedy. Jacob left the plantation unable to see where he was going, and no one mourned him out loud, but the fear around me grew heavier, because now it wasn't just overseers or white men. Now it could happen to anyone who thought they could touch me. That realization did something to the other slaves. Some started looking at me with hope they didn't dare admit, the kind of hope that says maybe power exists somewhere in this world besides the whip. Others looked at me with resentment, because anything that draws attention draws punishment, and they could feel attention gathering like storm clouds. I tried to stay small, to be invisible. But you can't be invisible when people are building stories around you. In the spring of 1850, a traveling slave trader named Silas Cobb arrived at the Thornton plantation. He came with a hard laugh and hard eyes, and he treated us like livestock. Not even bothering to pretend. He made men open their mouths so he could check teeth. He pinched arms and poked ribs. He made lewd comments about women, like we were meat he was selecting for dinner. Master Thornton stood with him, because money makes men patient. Mrs. Thornton stood too, her posture stiff with pride. Like selling bodies was just another kind of housekeeping. Cobb's hands moved fast, rough, always taking more space than needed. When he got to me, he smiled like he'd heard the rumor and liked it. He stepped closer, looked me over slowly, and his fingers lingered at my shoulder and then lower in a way that made my stomach twist. I pulled back on instinct. Cobb's smile snapped into anger. He slapped me hard enough to make my ears ring. "Stay still when I'm examining you," he growled, "or I'll give you something to cry about." The yard went silent. I tasted blood. Master Thornton's face went white, and in that moment I understood. He was not brave. He was only in charge when nothing strange happened. He stepped forward and said carefully, "Mr. Cobb, that particular slave has a history." Cobb laughed, loud and mocking. "You believe in curses," he said. "I've been trading slaves 20 years. There isn't a superstition a good whipping can't cure." Master Thornton swallowed and chose diplomacy over truth. He didn't order Cobb to stop. He didn't punish him. He just tried to contain the damage with words. Cobb didn't buy me. I was too expensive. Too much risk for a man who measured everything in profit, but he had already touched the line. He left that afternoon with a coffle of newly purchased slaves and a grin like he'd proven the rumor was just talk. A week later, word came back that Cobb had gone blind on the road to Savannah, that his vision blurred and then vanished, that he couldn't see the road, couldn't manage his slaves, couldn't do business. The same doctor who couldn't help Dalton and Carson couldn't help Cobb. Cobb lost his trade, lost his money, and ended up begging charity in the same town where he had bragged. When I heard it, I didn't feel triumph. I felt the world narrowing, because the story had traveled now. It had left the Thornton plantation and returned with proof, and proof makes rumors multiply. After Cobb, even Mrs. Thornton stopped looking at me like I was only a nuisance. She looked at me like a problem she couldn't beat into shape. Master Thornton enforced distance harder. He gave me tasks that kept me away from visitors. He ordered others not to speak to me unless necessary. He thought isolation was containment. He didn't understand isolation is also fuel. It turns a person into a symbol, and symbols never stay quiet. In late 1850, Reverend Blackwell came to the plantation to preach. He was the kind of minister who believed suffering was holy as long as someone else did it. He preached obedience to us like it was a gift. He spoke about slavery as God's order, and he watched our faces for resistance the way a hunter watches brush. Somebody had told him about me, maybe out of fear, maybe out of spite, maybe because stories have to be told. During his sermon, he pointed straight at me in front of everyone and shouted that I was a servant of Satan, that I used witchcraft to harm good Christian men, that the demon in me had to be beaten out. I stood still because movement would have been an admission. I kept my face blank, but inside me something went cold and steady again. Master Thornton shifted beside the minister, uncertain, trapped between fear of what I represented and the habit of respecting a white man with a Bible. Reverend Blackwell strode toward me with his Bible raised like a weapon. In the name of Jesus Christ, he declared, I command you to release the devil. He brought the Bible down against the side of my head. The blow made my vision blur for a second, and I dropped to my knees with my mouth tasting iron. The yard held its breath. I looked up at him and heard my own voice come out quiet and flat. You shouldn't have done that. Reverend Blackwell's face twisted with righteous anger. Don't you threaten me, girl, he spat. And he lifted the Bible again. That was when Master Thornton finally moved. He grabbed the minister's arm. Reverend, he said, tight, I must insist you stop. Reverend Blackwell jerked his arm free and denounced Master Thornton as a coward who let Satan live on his property. He left in a fury, shouting about purification and punishment and God's wrath. And I watched him go with the same feeling I'd had when Dalton screamed, not satisfaction, just inevitability. The next morning Reverend Blackwell woke up blind. But his blindness did not come alone. Word reached us that he had started raving, claiming he heard demons laughing, that he felt things crawling on his skin, that he smelled brimstone in every room. Men like him do not accept helplessness easily. They turn it into a war they can still feel powerful in, even if the war is only in their head. He was committed to an asylum. And people said it like a moral, like it proved something about God, or Satan depending on what they already believed. After Blackwell, even the last skeptics stopped calling it coincidence. Nobody touched me, nobody even stood too close. The other slaves avoided me like association could infect them. White folks gave me a wide berth and spoke to me like I might explode. I was 21 years old and I was safer than any slave girl on that plantation, and I had never felt more trapped. Safety without human connection is a kind of starvation. I ate alone. I worked alone. At night the quarters clustered together on one side, while I lay in my corner like I was a sickness they were trying not to catch. Ruth was the only one who crossed the space. She sat beside me and talked in a low voice about ordinary things, the only medicine she had for what I was becoming. Sometimes I wanted to beg her to stop, to protect herself, to keep her place in the community that still accepted her when it had stopped accepting me. But she wouldn't leave. "There, afraid," she said once, watching the others glance at us and look away. "Fear makes people act like they don't have hearts." I didn't answer because I didn't trust my answer. The truth was, I was starting to fear myself, not because I felt powerful, but because I felt uncontrolled. I hadn't wished for Jacob to go blind. I hadn't prayed for Cobb. I hadn't spoken Blackwell's name into any darkness, yet it happened anyway, like my body carried a trap that snapped shut on its own. By then even Dr. Whitmore had started offering explanations that sounded like excuses. He told Master Thornton that fear could shut a man's sight down, that guilt could do strange work inside the head, that the mind could punish the body if it believed it deserved punishment. He called it hysterical blindness, as if putting a name on it made it smaller, but the men stayed blind. And a name did not change that. Names only changed how people looked at me. They stopped seeing a girl and started seeing a rule, a warning, a story that could ruin them. And every night I lay awake, listening for footsteps, wondering whose hands would forget the rule next, and what darkness would follow. By the time the fear settled into something permanent, the plantation had learned a new way to breathe around me, shallow and careful, as if any sudden movement might break whatever fragile peace remained. I stopped counting the days the way I used to, because counting made me think about before and after. And there was no before left that felt real. There was only now. And now was quiet in a way that scraped at the inside of my skull. I worked alone more often than not, assigned tasks that kept me out of sight, scrubbing floors in empty rooms, folding linens where no one lingered, carrying water when the yard was empty. Master Thornton called it efficiency. I knew it for what it was: containment. I had become something that needed managing, not punishing. Ruth was the only thing that made the days different from each other. She found me when she could, slipped into the spaces where no one expected company, and sat beside me like the space had always been meant for two. She talked when the silence grew too heavy, about her childhood, about the mother she barely remembered, about the way she still reached for her at night half asleep. I listened because listening gave my mind somewhere else to stand. Sometimes I talked too, about my grandmother, about the old words she used when she thought no one was paying attention, about how I used to believe stories had endings. Ruth never asked me to explain what had happened to the men. She never asked me to promise it wouldn't happen to her. She treated the thing around me like weather, dangerous but not personal. That kindness made me more afraid than hatred ever had, because it meant there was something left in me that could still be taken. Master Thornton watched our friendship with narrowed eyes. He did not forbid it. He did not approve it either. He let it exist the way a man lets a fire burn low while keeping a bucket nearby. I knew he was waiting for an answer he could use. He did not have to wait long. In the fall of 1851, a man arrived who did not carry a whip or a Bible, but a notebook. Dr. Edmund Cartwright came from Augusta with the confidence of someone used to being listened to. He was not young, not old, with hair already graying at the temples and eyes that missed very little. He introduced himself as a physician and researcher, and when he said my name, it was without fear or accusation, just curiosity. I served tea in the parlor while he spoke to Master Thornton, and I listened because listening had become another kind of survival. He said he did not believe in curses. He said he believed in phenomena not yet understood. He said my case interested him because it broke rules that men like him depended on. Master Thornton agreed to let him examine me the way men agree to anything that might restore order. Dr. Cartwright set up a small workspace in an unused building and began with me. His examination was different from the others. He did not rush. He did not touch where he did not need to. He measured, listened, tested reflexes, asked questions about my health, my sleep, my family. He asked if I ever lost time, if I ever saw things that weren't there, if I ever felt something move through me when I was hurt. I told him the truth, that I did not feel powerful, that I did not feel in control, that sometimes I felt nothing at all until after. He wrote everything down. When he asked about the first night, about Dalton, about the prayer, my throat tightened, but I spoke anyway. I told him I had asked for justice and that the answer scared me. He did not flinch at that. He nodded like a man hearing a symptom he has been waiting for. Over the next weeks he left the plantation and returned, tracking down the men who could still be found. He examined Dalton and Carson where they lived with relatives, examined Jacob after he had been brought back temporarily from Alabama, examined Silas Cobb in Savannah where poverty had taken everything else. He came back with his notebook fuller and his certainty sharper. He told Master Thornton that all the men shared the same condition, damage to the visual cortex of the brain, a place where sight becomes meaning. Their eyes were fine, their brains were not. He called it cortical blindness. He said it usually came from trauma, from blows or strokes, not from sleep. He said what had happened should not be possible. When Master Thornton asked what caused it, Dr. Cartwright did not answer right away. He asked to speak with me again, and with Ruth present. He explained his theory carefully. Like a man walking across ice, he said the mind could defend itself, in ways we did not yet understand. He said severe trauma could teach the brain to protect the body automatically, without permission or awareness. He said he believed that when I was harmed, something in me responded by harming back, not through poison or magic, but through a psychological mechanism that reached outward and broke something fragile in the men who hurt me. He called it psychosomatic defense. He said it was unconscious, automatic, like pulling your hand away from fire. I listened to him speak about me like I was a case study and felt my stomach drop. If he was right, then I was not protected by something outside myself. I was the weapon. I asked him if it could be stopped. He did not lie. He said he did not know. He said if it was built from years of pain, it might not be something that could be undone. He said the safest course was to ensure I was never threatened again. Master Thornton seized on that like a solution. He told Dr. Cartwright he would see to it personally. Dr. Cartwright left a few days later with his notes and his questions and his interest intact. He said he would write about me without using my name. He said my case would be debated. None of that changed my days. What changed was how I saw myself. If this thing lived inside me, if it acted without my consent, then every breath I took near another person carried risk. I stopped sitting too close to Ruth even when she did not ask me to. I stopped touching anyone unless necessary. I lived carefully, afraid of my own fear, because fear had become the trigger for something I could not see or feel coming. The isolation deepened, not because others pushed me away, but because I pulled back. Master Thornton treated me well in the way men treat dangerous tools. I was fed, I was housed. I was not beaten. I was also not free. I was a rule, and rules do not get to choose. Ruth noticed the change in me and tried to fight it. But even she could not fully cross the distance that had grown. We talked less. When we did, our words circled the truth instead of touching it. The nights grew colder. My cough started as a small thing, a scratch in my chest I ignored because ignoring had become habit. When it worsened, I hid it as long as I could. Weakness invites attention, and attention invites decisions. Eventually Dr. Cartwright returned. This time not for curiosity but for duty. He examined me and said the word consumption in a voice that meant final tuberculosis. He told me gently that there was no cure he could offer. I nodded because by then I had learned how to accept sentences that could not be argued with. The disease took my strength in pieces. I could feel myself thinning. like something being worn down by use. Ruth stayed with me when she could, holding my hand, telling me small stories to anchor me to the room. I told her I was afraid, not of dying, but of never knowing what I was. She told me maybe knowing was not the point. She said maybe surviving as long as I had was already an answer. Master Thornton came once near the end and told me I would be buried in the family cemetery. He said it like it was a kindness. I thanked him, because thanking was easier than feeling. As my breath grew shorter, the question that had followed me 4 years finally quieted. I did not know if I was cursed or gifted or broken in a way no one could fix. I only knew that people had hurt me and paid a price they did not expect, and that I had lived inside that truth longer than anyone thought I would. The night before I died, Ruth sat with me in silence, and for the first time in years the silence did not feel like punishment. It felt like rest. I died on a cold morning in February of 1853, 2 months after I turned 23. And by the time the sun reached the windows of the quarters, my body had already stopped arguing with the world. The tuberculosis had taken its time with me, patient in a way the whip never was, hollowing me out breath by breath until even thinking felt like work. In the last weeks I understood something I hadn't before. That pain which comes slowly teaches you different lessons than pain which strikes all at once. I was not afraid of dying when the end came close enough to touch. What frightened me was the quiet question that never left me, the one no doctor, no preacher, no story could answer. What exactly I had been. Dr. Cartwright returned when it became clear I was fading, not with excitement this time, but with a heaviness that made him seem older. He examined me gently, as if gentleness might undo years of damage. He said there was nothing more he could do. I believed him because belief costs less energy than hope when you are tired. Ruth stayed with me whenever she could, sitting close enough that I could feel the warmth of another body without flinching. She held my hand and told me I was still here, still myself, even as my breath came shorter and the room seemed farther away. I told her I was scared of never knowing the truth, of dying without understanding whether the blindness was something my mind had created or something the world had given me back in response to pain. She told me maybe some truths were not meant to be owned, only survived. Master Thornton came once, standing at the foot of my bed, like a man visiting a strange animal he never quite understood. He said he would have me buried in the family cemetery, not the slave graveyard. He said it like it was a mark of respect, like it balanced some invisible scale. I thanked him because I had learned gratitude is sometimes just a way to end a conversation. When he left, the room felt lighter. On my last night, Ruth and I did not talk much. There was nothing left to explain. She cried quietly and I listened to her breathing until my own began to slip out of rhythm. The end came without ceremony. One moment I was counting breaths, the next I was not. Whatever questions I carried went with me into that dark, unanswered. After I died, the plantation did not change right away. The fields were still worked, the house still stood, the rules still held, but the fear lingered longer than my body did. The men who had gone blind never recovered their sight. Dalton died still blind and bitter, speaking my name like it was a curse even as his own life narrowed to a small, dark room. Carson lived longer, learned to move through the world without vision, but never escaped the knowledge that a choice he made had cost him something he could not buy back. Jacob disappeared into the records, sold and forgotten, blind in a world that had no patience for weakness. Silas Cobb died poor, his hands empty, his laughter gone, blind to everything he once believed he owned. Reverend Blackwell remained in the asylum until his death, still shouting about demons and punishments, unable to see anything except the story he needed to survive his own helplessness. Dr. Cartwright published his papers. He wrote about me without my name, described the phenomenon in careful language, argued that the mind could defend itself in ways not yet understood. that trauma could teach the brain to fight back without permission. Some doctors praised him, others mocked him. Some said it was hysteria. Some said poison. Some said coincidence stretched too far. None of them could prove anything. My case became a footnote, then a curiosity, then a legend passed down in pieces. Ruth lived long enough to see the war end safely. She gained her freedom and left Georgia, carrying my story quietly with her. She never sold it. She never used it. After she died, someone found her journal. In it she wrote that she believed I had simply been a girl hurt too often. A girl whose mind learned to protect her the only way it could, by making harm expensive. She wrote that whatever the truth was, I had been good, and goodness mattered more than explanation. The Thornton plantation was sold years later. The house fell into disrepair. My grave marker weathered until my name was barely legible, then not legible at all. People forgot where I was buried. But they did not forget the story entirely. In some versions I became a witch, in others, a saint, in others, a medical mystery. Each retelling said more about the teller than it did about me. The truth is simpler and harder. I lived. I was hurt. Men who hurt me lost their sight. I never chose it. I never controlled it. I never understood it. I was safer than most slaves and lonelier than any should be. I did not escape. I did not rise. I did not win. I endured until my body could not anymore. If there is meaning in that, it does not belong to me alone. It belongs to every person who learns that survival can look like power from the outside and feel like isolation from the inside. I was Serafina. I was the girl no one could touch. And when I was gone, all that remained were questions no one could answer and a reminder that some kinds of protection come at a price no one asks to pay.